So part of my past is having, because of a relationship with God like we all have. The Spirit said, do what I've called you to do, and I'll take care of the rest.
When you get into that space of realizing who you really are at a core, which is energy, then you can raise your vibrational frequency, your energy level, up to a level where you can connect and make that divine connection.
Black people in this country have to embrace ownership. We don't own anything. Therefore, all the dollars we get go out to somebody else who owns things.
Look for a miracle in America's mess and make a testimony out of your test. Well, kind greetings from Chaplain Maureen F. Burns and I for tonight's broadcast, Triumphant Thursdays with Dr. P.J. Anderson. We want you to experience your time with us tonight and every time we gather, that you engage with us, that you invite others to engage with us, that you have an opportunity to have your own, acknowledge your own, embrace your own victories and triumphs and high hopes that are always available to us when we kind of just take a look at our days from the rainbow's point of view, that when there's a storm, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be followed by a rainbow. We have coming to us tonight, or with us tonight, our previous guest, who is also special, Dr. Jamie. Dr. Jamie is a pastoral theologian and spiritual care practitioner and life navigation specialist and death midwife. So, we have midwives that bring us into the world, and now we have midwives to help us usher out of the world. Joining us tonight is another special guest, Margaret Conley, Reverend Margaret Conley. She is the owner of MLC Consulting, LCC, and the president of Mending Life Concepts Empowerment Group, Incorporated, where the focus of care is directed towards serving marginalized populations at the intersection of spirituality and emotional wellness. Reverend Margaret has produced evidence-based model, which is clinically aligned, theologically method designed for use by clergy. We got to talk, Reverend. We got to talk. In addition to this, it is good. Not only is it good for clergy, but for academics and for clinicians to help lead the conversation around faith-based trauma in individual and community settings. To bring all parties concerned, including the listening and viewing audience, up to date, I'm going to ask Chaplain Maureen to help me to remember where we left off in our conversation. There's more to Mrs. Job's story. And I had made the comment, Reverend Margaret and Dr. Jamie, that, my question is, that exactly what Mrs. Job said about cursing God and dying, or is that somebody in the community trying to get her husband to leave her so they could have Mr. Job while he's building his life back up? Or there's just somebody just being mean-spirited, lie on her. I just cannot imagine a sister telling her husband to curse God and die, especially if she has lost the same thing that he has lost. So that's kind of where we are. Can you think of anything else, Chaplain Mo?
I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay.
You're right on track.
So, Reverend Margaret, and I think Dr. Jamie is with us on audio.
Yes.
We're going to ask you ladies to carry the conversation on in terms of why something like that would have been written in Holy Writ, for the exception of that's the way patriarchal mindsets view women as less than.
Yes.
So let's redeem. First of all, let's redeem Mrs. Job.
Yes. Let's redeem her. I mean, she exists. She's in the text, and she's dismissed until, and I read in two places, as I stated, to do this. She's dismissed until chapter 42, where they gain everything. We often preach that from pulpits, that he received double for his trouble. But not only in that do we dismiss her, but we then dismiss the loss of everything that both of them lost. As if you can regain children and regain things, as if you don't mourn them or grieve them. And then, as we flow through this, it's still, she's dismissed. I think his friends get more attention than she does throughout the chapters. So I shouldn't say Chaplain PJ, because I know that's but
that's
Dr.
okay.
PJ is here tonight.
Same person.
Just to answer that, I really think this. I don't know if in this case did she dismiss because of her own dismissal. And so the Bible, I love Old Testament because it's like a good story. It's like a good soap opera. I mean, you can build so many things off of it. And so in this case, what would it have looked like if they had allowed her to sit with him in that suffering versus become an antagonist and to mishandle him? Because a lot of people, I've heard this preached so many different ways, and it's always a negative connotation. But my question tonight, and I hope we can investigate it to redeem her, is why didn't anyone, or why didn't the writer of this text announce her loss and announce what she had lost? And she too was sitting in a space of grieving something that was alive in front of her, who had announced that he lost everything, which means he dismissed her as well. So I don't know if she could have been redeemed in the text, but we can redeem her tonight because we have prophetic voice to do that. And so hopefully we can.
And I think another thing that bothers me about the patriarchal writings is that so often they don't even give the woman a name.
Right.
She's just an object.
She's an object, no name.
Yes.
And again, I think the three friends get more. And if I'm going to talk real Georgia, they get more play than she does, And so
Sure.
She literally is objectified. I mean, she birthed his children that he was on his face for every day, praying for them. And then she comes back at the end after being demonized, in my opinion, in this particular space in the text, to birthing more children and giving him, in the words of good preachers, double for his trouble. So again, it's as if she is property, which again, I mean, that's the Old Testament. That's how we see it, the patriarchy system of how we handle women. And so there are blotches and spaces in Old Testament, like Queen Sheba, where she comes and she's checking King Solomon. I mean, but you don't find that. That's not commonplace in Old Testament. So I think, as I studied Job's suffering, I think a lot of us, even women, do it. We compare ourselves to the suffering, but we neglect to compare ourselves to this wife. because he didn't experience that whirlwind of loss again by himself. And so what does it look like when we have women who are sitting in loss? We literally this week we're watching a mother grieve her son because his last words were, "I got pulled over. I think they got me for an air freshener." And so what do you do with that? Because everybody's now literally focusing back on the loss of George Floyd, even down to not thinking about the mother who lost her son, but George Floyd was dating the teacher, Dante, who died. I mean, literally, that's the taglines and the headlines. So how we're again dismissing this woman and her pain. And I watch other mothers of Black sons come on, and they're really trying to pump. Like, this mother lost her son, and his last words were, "I got pulled over. I think they pulled me over for my air freshener." And so that's all she has left in the memory. Again, I don't know. I can only use my imagination to think that when everything started to leave, Job's wife is, what are we going to do? Like, we're losing everything. All the prayers you put out, all the things that we have done together in a collective, we're losing. And he starts to slip into that space of depression even before, how I follow the text as a clinician, he starts to slip into spaces of depression even before he received the physical evidence of where he was. And so he dismisses her even before that physical evidence. Again, compared to what we're looking at today, we're losing the sight of mother because we keep looking at the trauma porn of George Floyd. And so now they're comparing them. How do we keep this woman alive? She's still here. She lost her son. How do we support her? How do we keep Job's wife alive? How do we name her? How do we keep her here? Because she's alive in this text. And he literally says, "I lost everything." Like,
So,
what do you do with that?
So how do we respond then to the 7 words that are attached to her verbalization to her husband? "Why don't you curse God and die?" How do we clean that up?
One, I don't know that it needs to be cleaned up.
Well, I mean, I don't know this. Okay, this is what I'm really saying is, what is the probability that she actually said that, as opposed to being accused of saying that?
I think the words were definitely put in her mouth. That's my opinion, my personal opinion, by a patriarchal writer.
And I think everything for her, even the concept of her, and I'm going to call it a concept because we don't get to really see her in all of her existence. We get to meet Job and all of his, but not her. And I do think those words were put there. And sadly, we've heard women of color say, why don't you? Like, God didn't show up for you in this moment. So that, again, makes for a good soap opera. Like, why don't you curse God and die? It could have been her grieving. Like, you dismissed me.
Right.
So if you dismiss me, like, God clearly, I'm breathing. Like, so why don't you just tell God whatever and move on? That is where we have to sit with, is the statement actually right, though?
Right.
Because we're watching how.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jamie.
Even if the words, right. So we know she's painted a certain way. But even painted that way, the words are very realistic. If I have loss is something, losing who and what is meaningful to you, can literally take your breath away. And to have compounded loss, and then to be rendered invisible in that moment, like we've lost the same thing, and I've lost you because you no longer see me. I don't know if you ever saw me, but in this moment, you have made it clear that you don't see me.
Ouch.
I'm mad at you, and I'm mad at God. And how many of us have not been mad at God in a moment? And shame on the person who sums up my life by taking the moment when I have had my heart ripped into pieces and using that as my life story. That is that's the title of my book. That when my heart has been ripped into pieces, that is the story of my life. And the challenge for me is that some of us also have been taught to use that as our life story, because so many other people have used it as our life story. That's another chapter we can talk about. But shame on the person who uses as my life story, because we don't do that for anybody. We don't do that for the males, for the men in the text. We don't use as their life story. We don't use as David's life story him going over and seeing old girl bathing and taking. We don't use that as his life story, right? We don't. There are other texts. We don't use that as their life story. But for her life story, for her life story, that's her life story. Shame on the person who, in my moment of my greatest moment of pain, that's my life story. Ain't nothing else you can remember about me. I raised them kids well, didn't I? Nothing else you remember about my story. So,
yeah, and yeah,
That's deep.
ain't nothing else you remember about my story. That's all.
Is that? Yeah,
Ain't that what the people do to us? Ain't they what they do to us?
that's what they're doing now. I mean,
He
that's
was selling
why.
Reese's. He was trying to buy. Ain't that what they do to us?
Nothing has changed very much.
Yep.
Perhaps the
And
more
I
we
don't-
change, the more we remain the same.
And Dr. PJ, I don't know if it can, because we've taken this text, in I'll say Westernized Church Universal, and we have ascribed that this is how we're supposed to live, and so we pick and choose the things that cause us to sit in spaces of elevation. And so why would I elevate her? Because even when we read it, the writings, according to those who I'm using the Women's Bible Commentary, and so the original statement, or in Hebrew, is supposed to be translated. She didn't just say, curse God and die. She asked him a question: do you still persist in your integrity? That's a huge question before curse God and die. Like, do you still sit in integrity? Integrity holds a lot. If we want to talk about that, do you still
Let's
see
do.
me? Do you still see what you do have? Do you still hold on to the show of the prayers that you were giving? Because right now you're just sulking. Can you still show up when we don't have anything? Can you still be present? If you cannot, then she gives the suggestion of cursing God and dying. So if that's the case, then that changes the whole narrative of how she should be seen. It's a beautiful question she asked him. Can you still hold integral space with how you say you view God when you had all this stuff? What else can we ask that question to? And then that is how we bring her back to life. That is how we redeem her with the initial question. The statement wasn't curse God and die, because that's what we preach and it sounds good. But the question was the thing that was big and loud. Do you still have integrity? So where do we ask that in spaces so that this woman's story can now become more alive? We can see it. We can redeem her. That's a question that should be asked across the board. Do you still have integrity even though we're watching brown and black bodies die? Do you still have integrity even though we still have food deserts? Do you still have integrity even though Flint still has dirty water 10 years later? Do you still have integrity? Because you put on a good show, but do you still have integrity? Or are you going to sit here and continue to flounder out? What happens with that? I think the focus of that should be her question, not her response. Because he wasn't talking.
I think they dismissed her question because patriarchy said that she didn't have the right to ask the question.
Correct. She shouldn't have asked him anything. But she did. So what does that look like for women of color? Because I want to say that because these are people of color.
Absolutely.
I don't want to whitewash it. These are people of color. They sitting in the Middle East, Eastern Africa, asking questions. So there's some melanin there. So what does that look like? Because we also today, to bring her alive and to bring her back, what does that look like for Black women who are asking questions? And I'll say it. I've been in DC for like 2 weeks, working through some stuff with the police here at the Capitol, and just even watching the news, questions are being asked by Black women about integrity and showing up. And it wasn't until Al Sharpton showed up. It wasn't until some male figure showed up. Then now all of a sudden we want to talk about it. But when the mother is crying and asking where's the integrity of, and then she gets angry, we want to focus on her anger, but focus on her question to bring her back.
Yes.
And if we can sit there, we start to redeem Job's wife, and we even start to see maybe the bits and pieces of how she is still present for him, even though he's no longer present for her. He faded on her.
Well, my goodness. Dr. Jamie, do you have a response to the question of integrity? Did we lose her?
Lost her. Yeah, I think we
lost her.
Okay. She'll be back momentarily. I see Pastor Sue letting us know that she stepped away. And this is not the only place in the Bible where the question of integrity, if not raised, should be raised.
Yes.
I don't really want to talk about Delilah in one sense. In another sense, I kind of do want to talk about Delilah because she too is demonized. Now, she was she asked Job. She asked Samson 3 times. What is the source of your strength? And I don't think that she was being deceitful necessarily, because she was right up front with her question as an example of integrity. At least that's the way I see it.
Well, I don't think she was being deceitful at all, because even the writers, I don't know if they messed up, but they intentionally put it there. But it says she told him what she was doing. He assumed it would be something else. And so then we demonize her because of his assumption. So what does that look like? Because again, here's this question that she asked, but we immediately jump to the cursing of God when the question, she's asking him a question. She's not telling him outright, curse God. If you don't have any integrity, then let God go. So what do we do with Delilah? If I'm telling you what I came to do and you keep playing games with me, I'm going to keep asking the same question. Now, I'm not changing my focus on what I came to do, because I've been paid to do a job. She literally told him what she came to do. So he kept playing games. What do we do when we take the emotional space of women and we think that it's fun? Like that, he thought it was a game. He too dismissed the power of what she was saying in her word. I'm telling you what I came to do. I'm telling you I was paid to do it. I'm telling you why I'm here, and you keep playing around with me because you think this cat and mouse is beautiful. You like it. Your ego is above and big. But I told you what I came to do. So, but we talk about women when they sit in those spaces of staying focused on what they came to do. And again, that too is demonized. That when a woman sits on course and does what she needs to do, then we say she thinks she's better than, she's not submissive. She doesn't follow through with the line or the order of, because she's stepping out of place of. Again, we even said it tonight. The writer here, the way it's worded is if this woman who was not supposed to ask questions in Old Testament has stepped out of line and asked questions, but she lost her children too. She lost her home too. She lost her cattle too. She lost position and power because she was connected to him in the community too. She lost too. And so, yes, I'm going to ask the question, do you still have integrity? She could have been questioning herself. Do I still have integrity? Do I still hold true to the righteous space that was announced before this test came? And if I don't, then then give up.
So let's unpack a little bit further this word integrity and the way it's being applied to Job's wife. What is her space of integrity? It's in raising the question, right?
Yeah. I think to just disturb it. I think to just disturb what's going on, and even I guess to add attention to this conversation, she was being honest.
Okay.
Her space of integrity in this, she was being honest about what happened. He, on the other hand, is questioning God on why did it happen. She's just being honest about present moment. It happened. So what are we going to do to move? What are we going to do to rebuild? What are we going to do to keep going? How many times do we see women say that? In the last 100 years, how have we watched women say, okay, so how are we going to move though? How are we going to keep going? We can't sit here and just own it.
And I guess it's in our cultural and our spiritual and our theological DNA to focus on the man.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons. And if there's an opportunity to focus on the woman's point of view, like Bathsheba suffered as much as David did when the baby died.
Yeah.
But all of the conversation is steered toward David and him fasting and ripping his clothes apart and pleading and begging for the life of the child, and no mention of Bathsheba and her grieving process.
And to bring up George Floyd again, the fact of the matter is, not only does our society look to men as the standard, but we look to whites as the standards. It is whites that went and conquered everything. It is whites that discovered property and land. It is whites that are the standard. And there's no reason for that, because there's a lot more indigenous people than there are whites. So why did whites become the standard?
Now that's a good question.
That's a great question. Happen? Well, I mean, we have a construct of race. So I put up today, because I hear a lot of people saying, I'm praying to God to fix this situation. But this isn't God's problem. Race was created so that we could have levels cast, whatever you want to call it, of people, so that we can create a dominance. And so here we are with this creation of what we call race. And so the dominant other, white people set the standard, and then they labeled the standard. So just like how we're looking at the text and we immediately jump to curse God and die versus going back to the question of integrity, like white people literally label the standard. So they labeled the definition of discovery, but you didn't discover anything. People already lived here. Like you landed because you lost track and course. And we celebrate discovery based upon how it was defined. But you didn't discover anything. These people lived here. They were already cultivating land. There was nothing to discover. You didn't walk in and come into a place and bring technology to it. They already had homes. They already knew how to thrive off the land. But because they came in, created the construct of race, was able to literally cast out a system and tell you who was going to be dominant and how to purchase, how to place, and how to decide. We still live in that system today. We in violence, and we're watching 14 days now of trauma porn, where somebody today realizing what has been done, and probably realized it then, says, I don't want to talk about it. Because again, we get to define freedom of speech and wherever. Freedom of speech for African Americans up until recently has been violent. Oh, you're now causing a riot, even though it's a peaceful protest. But freedom of speech today got to get exercised in the Fifth Amendment when I don't want to talk about it.
Well,
and guess what? The court had to honor it.
We got to take a time out. We'll come back to you, Chaplain Maureen.
Okay.
When we return, and we'll also talk about this thing called the First and Second Amendment. I have something to share with you ladies that I found very interesting. Pastor Sue, if you would please, carry her away.
This time always goes by so quickly. I'm so grateful for Reverend Margaret and for Reverend Dr. Jamie for joining us tonight and engaging us in this rich discourse. It could go on for hours. I'm like all giddy in the back here because this is giving me all my life. But we are going to get into our announcements for this evening. First up, of course, we want to shout out our Chaplain Maureen Burns, who's with us tonight. She has an organization called Transformations Possible. She is an advanced law of attraction practitioner. And so if you are interested in some life coaching, she does have life coaching available. You could give her a call at 808-264-6252 or email her at transformationspossible@gmail.com. If you are with us on Tuesdays, you know that we have our Tuesday evening broadcast under TFAM National Veteran Support Group. And so if you are a veteran, you identify as LGBTQIA, or if you are ally, and particularly if you are of color, we want you to join our group on Facebook and also like our page on Facebook. We are in a series called What is the Soul? And next week, Tuesday, we are coming with part 2. And so we want you to join us right here at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for What is the Soul? Part 2. We don't have many announcements today. What else do we have? I'll just do Kara. Kara Solutions, focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. Administrative, business, and consulting services for dreamers, visionaries, entrepreneurs, faith-based, and community-based organizations. If you want to learn more about Kara and the services that we provide, this is an example. This broadcast tonight is an example of one of the services that we provide. So if you are interested of perhaps having your own broadcast, or you want to learn more about Kara, visit our website at www.kara-solutions.com. We also want to give you here at Triumphant Thursdays with Dr. PJ the opportunity to advertise or to sponsor. We do have advertising and sponsorship opportunities available, and there are 3 ways that you can do so. The first is an info listing or a banner at $15 per week, and so this is an example of a banner, and your information up to 200 characters will be shown in this banner every week for $15 per week. The other way is a static overlay. Let me get rid of that. A static overlay, and that is what you're looking at right now, right? It covers up the entire screen, and it's also known as a flyer ad, and that is for $25 per week. And the next way is a video ad at $40 per week, and I will show you an example of what that looks like. So that was an example of a video ad. And so if you are in the market for one, if you need one, and you would like to advertise this or become a sponsor with Triumphant Thursdays with Dr. PJ, you can certainly reach out to me, Sue at kara-solutions.com, and I will create one for you. If you still desire to give, but you don't want to advertise or sponsor, but you want to sow a seed, you can do that too, right? So we invite you to sow a seed. You can do so in 2 ways: Cash App, $ Space for Grace, MI, or we'll take a paper check too at Space for Grace Without Walls, UCC. You can mail that to P.O. Box 23173, Lansing, Michigan 48909. These have been all of your announcements, and we're going to hand it back over to Dr. PJ, Chaplain Mo, Reverend Margaret, and Reverend Dr. Jamie.
Thank you, Pastor Sue. And we look for every opportunity possible to give a shout out to our bishop, the Reverend Dr. Bishop Yvette A. Flunder, the founder of City of Refuge, United Church of Christ, the founder of the Fellowship for Affirming, the founder and the prelate for the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. And of course, we want to give a shout out to Pastor Sue's pastor, the Reverend Dr. Bishop elect Vanessa M. Brown, who's just celebrated coming up to her 14th anniversary. Doesn't seem like it's been 14 years, but this is Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. And this is Pastor Sue's pastor. And we certainly want to give a shout out to Pastor Sue, who is TFAMS, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries National Youth minister and a member of the Shepherd's Table at Rivers of Living Water, and the administrator of this and your broadcast. As soon as you get in touch with her, and by all means, do so. We also want to thank our guests, Reverend Margaret L. Conley. This is the first night we've had her with us, and we are so delighted to have you, Reverend Margaret. And when I saw your picture, when Pastor Sue sent your bio out and photo, I said, I remember her. Haven't seen her in a long time, but I remember her. And of course, we are grateful for Chaplain Maureen. She and I both were elevated to the office of chaplain in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. Bishop Flunder did that for me about 20 years ago, and for Chaplain Maureen about 2 years ago. So we are so grateful for our bishops and our bishop elects and our pastor Sue, and of course for Dr. Jamie, who is a faithful death midwife, a faithful preacher and teacher, and a faithful lot of things that we won't talk about tonight, but maybe another night. I've invited both of them back 2 weeks from tonight, when we will be looking at another woman who I think raised some critical questions. The woman at the well raised some. I mean, she took the Jesus of Nazareth to task. But in the meantime, back at the ranch, she discovered she became self-aware of her gifts of preaching and teaching. She became aware that she was a woman of worth. And we want to look at these scriptures where we can identify the worth of the woman through her questions, through her unspoken questions in tonight's example. She only raised one. Mrs. Job only raised one question, but surely there were others that had been brought up in this broadcast tonight. So we said that we would begin with Chaplain Maureen when we return. You were in the midst of saying.
Yes, I live in Hawaii, and Hawaii was a sovereign country. And white men came here, especially white religious men came here, and just kicked the queen out, just kicked her out and said, you don't matter, you're a woman, you don't count. We own the land now. And the Hawaiians said, land ownership? What's that? They didn't even understand the concept of land ownership because they shared everything. So they didn't understand fences and boundaries and land. They didn't get it. And then the whites turned around and said, only land owners can vote. And of course, none of the Native Hawaiians own land. So they couldn't vote on anything. So the whites took over the vote, And then all of a sudden, President Roosevelt comes in and annexes the country of Hawaii and says, you're now the 50th state. It was an act of war. And nobody acknowledges it.
My
Hawaii
goodness.
is a sovereign country.
So, I tell you, the privilege that white people take.
Yeah. Amen. Not this one.
But even sitting in that privilege, it comes down to this understanding of this patriarchal look. I mean, we have taken this text and I've watched women dismiss this woman because they've taken on the life of Job. Even in my ordination process, I call her my ordination sister. She took on the life of Job. She didn't take on the life of wife. And though he's seen as this universal humanistic piece, and so we all have sat in suffering, his wife sat in suffering too. Why not take on the likeness of wife if you're going to do a comparison? Well, we don't know to. So just like Chaplain Maureen said, the Hawaiians were like, what do you mean own? What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about boundaries? What do you mean splitting it up? Like, so that they're confused in this state. So even tonight, like offering to people to take on the likeness of Job's wife, who is unnamed in this westernized text that we call holy, like that's uncomfortable. Because so you're telling me to come a no-name figure that's been demonized. And now what I'm asking you to do is just ask the question of integrity, sit with that and then come back and say it, because the question is, if you don't have integrity, then why are you holding on to this God space? Not kill God, but what's inside of you that's holding on to something that you don't even believe in. And hopefully I didn't say that too harsh.
No, that's
real.
It's real. And that's what we need. We need more real conversations. We need to come from behind what has been identified as the sacred text and the sacred desk and the sacred pulpit and the sacred classroom and all of this sacred stuff. When all we're doing is regurgitating Western thought. All the way back. I mean, and we can go all the way back to when the enslaved were brought to build this country, but were not allowed to vote. We're not, and were stripped of their culture, their name, their language. It was against the law for them to learn to read. And if any sympathizer was caught teaching them to read, both of them came to the same end. So this whole thing of looking at Holy Writ and looking at life from the matriarchal's point of view, from the people of color's point of view, is the struggle of the hour. And perhaps the struggle for many days to come. But like Bishop Flunder says, the only difference between a heretic and a heroine is time. So let's just go ahead and do what we're going to do.
And maybe free some people in the process.
That's right. Going to free some people in the process. Going to make some people angry in the process. Going to be demonized by some folks in the process. But we are committed to growing into the people that God has created us to be. And I am not finding finding silence about our various issues, about our various concerns, about the way women are treated in ancient and contemporary life. It is not comfortable for me to just allow it to continue to go on. And I think tackling the ancient women is a great way to go, because they need liberation also.
Amen.
Even in their death, they need liberation. They need redemption. And so back to that question of redemption, Dr. J, you had stepped away for a few minutes. when Reverend Margaret started talking about how we could redeem Mrs. Job by focusing in on her question and not on what was written about what she said. And we had come to you for a response on the issue of integrity and redemption.
She
As
asked Job if he had integrity still.
I'm sorry. Who had integrity? Does Job have integrity?
Job's wife asked Job if he was still in integrity. That was the question before she said, curse God and die. She asked that question.
And Reverend Margaret added, that is one way that we can redeem Mrs. Job by focusing in on the question.
Before that question.
The question before the remark.
Mm-hmm.
So unpacking the question, I understand Reverend Margaret to say is Mrs. Job's way of actually asking anyone, any patriarch in particular, who is into his ego.
Mm-hmm.
What you're not acknowledging that I'm even here,
mm-hmm.
and having suffered the same as you have suffered, mm-hmm. and you're not even acknowledging. I mean, you're taking it all unto yourself. Look
right.
at what the Lord has done to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not even thinking of his wife's presence.
Right. He erased her. Right. She's rendered invisible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how does that fit in? How does that help us to redeem Mrs. Job?
How does her asking him, does he have integrity? How does her calling him to task with
the question?
Right. With in this moment where there is such great loss, who do you see in this moment? Who is affected in this moment? Who am I to you in this moment? Who am I to God in this moment? Because I know you know who you are to God in this moment. At least I know you know who you think you are to God in this moment. And you're probably wondering if God sees you. But do you wonder if God also sees me? Like, because you've lost some stuff. And I think that's a question. Yeah. So like, that's a question for all of us, right? Like, I know you're praying about whether or not God sees you in your loss. I think somebody was saying they were praying for their son, and somebody said, but I'm also praying for all of our sons. Like I want God to see you, but I also want God to see me. And do you want God to see me too? Like, we're connected, bruh. Job, you ain't do this thing by yourself. Like, you got in something to make these babies. You got in something to make these babies. And it's not just that grief, because sometimes grief calls us to, in our sadness and in our frustration, sometimes we forget about the people around us, right? So sometimes it's the grief in a moment but sometimes it's patriarchy that we dismiss, right? So, bro, it's not that you were grieving that you dismissed me. It is that you just don't count me as equal, as part of, as worthy, right? So it wasn't that the grief, in your grief, you forgot about me. It was, I'm dismissed because I'm easily erasable. I'm invisible, that you forgot about me.
I'll have to go back and read the text, but as the bad news was coming, were they addressing Job and his wife, or was she not there when the bad news was coming?
She was not there.
So
She wasn't
She
there.
didn't come back in until the 42nd chapter.
right. So
42nd verse. Excuse me.
Right. She is not written in the text. Right. Which she's written in the text in the way she's written in the text the way she's written in the text.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. She's written in the text here to tell us to curse God. So I don't know where she was.
I don't.
Okay.
Jamie, oh God, like that's when I read this text, where did she disappear to after asking that question? Like, where did you put her? And then the invite for those that are conservative is that she's invited back in the 42nd chapter. I don't even know if that was her because she disappeared for so long. Like, did she stick around? When I read this text, I also think about Vashti, where again, we elevate someone in their dismissal of us. And we do it even today. I'm going to elevate you in the dismissal of me. And so, because I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to give you a response. And so when I look back and I look at Esther and we read about Vashti, this first chapter, we look at Xerxes and he's literally asking her to bring herself and all of the women who serve with her butt naked to parade in front of a group of people. And so what would we call that today? We make large about trafficking, right? We make large about all of that. But we dismiss it when it comes down to things where you can have a sheriff or a police chief saying Cherokee County, Georgia, he's just having a bad day. Because we dismissed it in the text with her too. He kicked her out. Nobody came back to say, but sir, why did you ask the queen to parade herself? We don't come back and say, Job, why would you dismiss your wife and she lost everything too? Writer, why would you not even include her in the loss? Job lost everything. She didn't even get included in the test that God created with Satan. God dismissed her, according to the writer. Satan dismissed her. I want to try your servant Job, as if he's out here making it happen by himself. Jamie said it best. I think she used the right words. You got into something to make these kids. So how can you dismiss me when you could not do this alone? And even in the text, this is where I get in trouble, you guys. God, the way the writer put this, dismisses her.
Good trouble. Good trouble.
Yeah, good trouble. God dismisses this woman. And then we want to bring her back to demonize her because we missed the question of integrity. Then we dismiss her again. And then we supposedly bring her back in the 42nd chapter to labor to create double for him and dismiss the grief of the entire book.
Right. As
that,
if double
that doesn't sit well with me.
Does right. And what does double do? That, and I don't even like the whole double piece. That doesn't double does not replace. It does not replace. It does not replace.
Does not replace
the original children, the original everything.
It doesn't replace. Yeah. So
they lost all that.
They lost all that. So even now that even as people of color, we sit back and we ask for reparations or we ask for land back. For people of color who are saying, this is what we're going to do. And I'm just not talking about BIPOC, like people of color. It doesn't replace the history of how we lost our culture and ourselves. It doesn't replace how you dismiss me in the story. It doesn't replace how you have whitewashed the text to create a narrative that this was a blessing that you enslaved me, that it was a blessing that you captured and killed and raped and robbed.
Right.
That is almost how we do David and Bathsheba. It was a blessing that he raped her, got her pregnant, and then he had to grieve the loss of this child for killing the husband. We threw Bathsheba out too, like, because he killed the husband, he raped her. She got pregnant. She didn't have any choice because he was the king. Like, she couldn't say, nah, bro, I'm not coming over there. No, she had to follow instructions, or else she faced death. Either way, she faced loss. But we dismiss her again because he's sad because he lost the baby and killed her husband, not because he mishandled her and her humanity.
Right.
So what do we do with all of that dismissal? Because again, God is dismissing women too in the text if we want to sit with it. And that's hard to hear. But God dismissed Bathsheba too.
Well, they made God a white man. So, I mean, come on.
a good white man. I mean, a good lily white flowing hair. Isn't Jesus beautiful from that German man that Adolf Hitler drew? I mean, I think it's wonderful. So, but that also lets you know an ego how self can't be maintained in just the awe of reading what the likeness and revelation says about what Jesus could look like, and the simple fact that God even we shouldn't even be naming name what we now put so much into how we can sell it and how we can pump it up, and how if we change the narrative, look at what the Southern Baptist Convention did. If we change the narrative, then we have to admit that we forced you to be here, that we tricked you to be here, that we did stuff to you in order to get here, so what does that look like for us when we finally, again, because the question tonight was, how can we bring her back? How can we redeem her? Redeeming her by asking that question: do you still have integrity? And if you don't, then why are you worshiping something and even becoming angry with something you no longer believe in? Curse God and die.
My goodness. Well, this is all right. This is
Jamie,
wonderful.
you okay?
Well, we have 1 minute left, and before we leave, we are going to ask Dr. J if she will pray for us tonight. And I don't have any particular requests, but I would appreciate you lifting up our listening audience and our viewing audience, that they will join us in opening up our third eye so that we can see the way God sees, and opening up our third ear so that we can hear the way God hears, and opening up our heart so that we can love God and one another the way God loves us. I think that is so important, that people understand that this thing called love is the same thing called God.
Yeah.
You can't separate them, and everybody is included. Everybody, nothing you can do, nothing that you cannot do to be separated from the love of God. And what a wonderful walk it is to be among you and Reverend Margaret and Chaplain Mo and Pastor Sue, to help me also keep my third eye open and my third ear open and my heart open to learn as much as I can, as much as humanly possible, how to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly before, because I struggle with it, and I don't mind struggling with it, because I know on the other side of the struggle I will be stronger. As I listen to the way Reverend Margaret talked tonight, and I say to myself, now that just never occurred to me to look at the question. But it's in conversations like this that we learn how to be more just and more loving. And thank you, Dr. Margaret. Really appreciate that. Dr. J?
Creator and Redeemer, the one who is present in us all. In this moment, we just take a deep breath and we give thanks, and we ask your blessing on all who have gathered virtually, all who will watch the replay. God, we pray that everyone who hears this would know that they are loved, would know that they are affirmed, that they are seen, and that there is nothing that anyone can do to erase them. God, we pray that we hear, that we see, that we find ways to be present with one another in ways that are just, in ways that are equitable, in ways that dismantle systems that seek to damage, that seek to do harm. God, we thank you for Dr. PJ. We thank you for Reverend Margaret. We thank you for Chaplain Maureen. We thank you for Pastor Sue. We thank you for Bishop Flunder. We thank you. I'm saying Bishop-elect Brown, but God, we thank you for leadership that knows what it means to walk in integrity. We thank you for opportunities to wrestle with your word. We pray that you would just breathe on us and all who were listening, that we would be affirmed in all of our being, whether we be Black, white, whether we are queer or trans. God, all of who we are, knowing that we are loved by you. This is our prayer, Lord, in your mercy, hear and answer. It's in the name of all that is holy, all that is just, all that is righteous that we pray. Amen. Go in peace. Thank you, Dr. PJ.